For centuries, the Middle East maintained a delicate balance. Although Jerusalem was under Muslim control, Christian pilgrims regularly made the long journey to the Holy City unarmed, moving through the landscape with relative ease. That balance broke in 1095, when Pope Urban II stood before a council in France. He called on European knights to launch a holy war to seize Jerusalem, offering an unprecedented spiritual incentive: the total forgiveness of all sins for anyone who joined the campaign. The message ignited a religious frenzy. Across Europe, thousands of nobles and professional knights and ordinary peasants began sewing cloth crosses onto their chests, identifying themselves as crusaders. By framing a military invasion as a guaranteed path to salvation, the Church set an absolute moral standard. It was a spiritual ideal that the messy, violent reality of medieval warfare would struggle to maintain. While many marched for their faith, others followed the call for more tangible rewards. For hardened knights, the journey east represented a chance to secure new lands, vast wealth, and personal glory in a region far from the reach of their European rivals. The reality for the thousands of untrained peasants who joined the march was far grimmer. They faced a grueling, multi-thousand-mile trek, plagued by starvation, disease, and constant attacks, before they ever saw the walls of a Middle Eastern city. This mixture of divine promise and raw earthly ambition meant the movement could not remain a simple pilgrimage. It quickly evolved into a brutal military invasion, driven by conflicting motivations. When the Crusaders finally reached the Middle East, they encountered a series of fortified cities that turned the mission into a grueling campaign of sieges under the blazing desert sun. The campaign reached its peak in 1099 with the capture of Jerusalem. Historical accounts describe a horrific massacre, with Crusader forces slaughtering thousands of Muslim and Jewish residents as fires consumed the city's holy sites. To the Crusaders, this bloodbath was a divine victory that proved God was on their side. To the Muslim world, it became the defining symbol of foreign cruelty and unprovoked aggression. Following the conquest, European rulers established Christian kingdoms and began building massive fortresses like this one. These stone giants were designed to project power and maintain control over a deeply hostile territory. The era of the peaceful traveler had ended. The capture of Jerusalem replaced religious pilgrimage with a state of permanent militarized occupation and a cycle of conflict that would last for 2 centuries. This portrait depicts the man who eventually countered the Crusader expansion, Saladin. He focused his strategy on a goal the Crusaders lacked: the political and military unification of Egypt and Syria into a single coordinated front. In 1187, Saladin met the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin. He used the terrain to his advantage, surrounding the heavily armored, water-deprived European knights in the scorching heat until their forces were completely crushed. The defeat allowed Saladin to recapture Jerusalem, sending a shockwave of outrage back to the European continent and triggering immediate calls for a new campaign. Saladin's success demonstrated that a unified political strategy, grounded in the realities of the region, was a far more effective tool for victory than the fractured zealotry of the Crusader states. The Third Crusade transformed into a calculated struggle between empires. The war was defined by the rivalry between Saladin and King Richard the Lionheart, focusing as much on tactical dominance as on religious fervor. Despite years of intense combat and massive sieges, the war ended in a stalemate. The two leaders eventually negotiated a truce that allowed Christian pilgrims access to the city, but left Jerusalem in Muslim hands. By 1204, the original goal vanished. The Fourth Crusade diverted, attacking the Christian city of Constantinople. The movement splintered further. In the Children's Crusade, thousands of youths marched east, only to die or be enslaved before ever reaching the Holy Land. The Holy War had drifted into a self-destructive cycle of violence. It had become a series of disjointed military expeditions that frequently targeted fellow Christians rather than the lands they originally set out to reclaim. The end came in 1291. With the fall of the final Crusader stronghold, the European presence in the Holy Land collapsed, bringing 2 centuries of religious warfare to a definitive military close. The immediate legacy was one of profound destruction. Millions were dead, entire cultural centers were leveled, and a deep-seated religious animosity was etched into the history of both Europe and the Middle East. But as the fighting stopped, a different kind of connection remained. The 2-century-long collision between these 2 civilizations had forced them into a constant, if violent, exchange of ideas and resources. To sustain these wars, European kings had to centralize their power and create new tax systems. Meanwhile, returning soldiers and merchants brought back new technologies, Arabic numerals, and a taste for Eastern spices, creating a permanent demand for cross-continental trade. While the Crusades failed every one of their religious and military objectives, the scale of the movement forced Europe out of its isolation. By attempting to conquer the East, the Crusaders inadvertently helped build the trade networks and administrative structures that would define the centuries to follow.